Chapter 5. Fireworks and Fault Lines. Sweetbriar Ridge shimmered beneath the summer twilight, the soft golden light giving way to dusky blues as lanterns flickered to life across the town square. Picnic blankets dotted the grassy lawn, children chased each other barefoot with sparklers, and the scent of smoked ribs and fresh cornbread drifted lazily from the community grills. The town cookout was more than a meal. It was an unspoken ritual, a celebration of roots, resilience, and community spirit. For Charlie, it was also a proving ground. Her first public appearance since being named co-chair of the Apple Blossom Festival. And as she walked across the square in a gingham sundress that Mabel had unearthed from an old cedar trunk, claiming it made her look like sunshine, Charlie felt eyes following her. Not unkindly, but curiously, as if the town was still deciding whether she truly belonged again. "Relax," Mabel murmured beside her, linking arms. "Your shoulders are so tight I could bounce a quarter off them. These people changed your diapers, for heaven's sake." "That's exactly why I'm nervous," Charlie whispered back, adjusting the bowl of coleslaw in her arms. "They remember everything." "They remember the good stuff too," Mabel said, patting her hand. "Like how you organised that fundraiser for Mr. Peterson's medical bills when you were just 17, or how you taught swimming lessons to the kindergartners every summer." Charlie smiled despite herself. "I'd forgotten about that." "Well, they haven't." Mabel nodded toward a cluster of women by the dessert table. "Mrs. Larson still tells everyone how you saved her Tommy from sinking like a stone." Charlie watched as several grandmothers sampled her coleslaw, their expressions shifting from skepticism to cautious approval. "Tell that to the dozen grandmas analysing my coleslaw like it's a business proposal." "You're the one who added kale to it," Mabel teased. "That's like sneaking broccoli into a brownie." Charlie grinned, but her stomach fluttered with nerves. She scanned the square and found him. Ethan stood near the bandstand, sleeves rolled up, holding a soda bottle while talking with Mayor Liz. The fading sun caught in his hair, and when he glanced her way, their eyes locked. That quicksilver rush bloomed through her again, startling and dangerous. He gave her a small private smile. She returned it, heart skipping. "I swear, watching you two is better than my daytime programs," Mabel muttered, eyes twinkling. "I'm going to find Ruth. Try not to overthink everything for 5 minutes, would you?" As Mabel wandered off, Charlie made her way toward the buffet tables, stopping to chat with old teachers and neighbours who called her name. The conversations flowed more easily than she'd expected, memories resurfacing with each familiar face. The librarian who'd always saved new romance novels for her. The barber who'd given her free lollipops even after she was too old for them. The band struck up a fiddle tune, and the square transformed into a makeshift dance floor. Locals clapped in time, couples twirled, and the laughter of children rang out like wind chimes. "Go," Mabel appeared at her elbow, nudging her gently. "Before someone else does." Charlie hesitated, then crossed the square slowly, each step purposeful but uncertain. Her pulse quickened as she approached Ethan, who was now standing alone, tapping his foot to the rhythm. Ethan stepped forward before she could speak. "You look like Sweetbriar itself made you." She smiled, cheeks warming. "You clean up pretty well, too." His blue button-down brought out the colour in his eyes, and she noticed he'd actually ironed his jeans. "Want to dance? I thought you'd never ask." He offered his hand and she took it. The world narrowed to music and movement as he guided her onto the wooden platform. They swayed through the first steps, feet finding rhythm with ease, his hand at her waist, her fingers curled around his shoulder. Their bodies remembered what their hearts had forgotten. "You used to lead with your left foot," she murmured. "I used to trip over my own shoes. You just always made it look graceful." She laughed, and for a while they danced without words. The fiddle sang beneath the stars, and Charlie found herself relaxing into the familiar steps of the swing dance they'd learned in high school. Ethan spun her out and back, their movements synchronized as if they'd been practicing for years instead of meeting again after a decade apart. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked breathlessly as he caught her in a perfect spin. "I may have taken some lessons," he admitted, a hint of color rising in his cheeks. "After Gracie started ballet. I figured at least one of us should know what we're doing at the father-daughter dance." The image of Ethan practicing dance steps with his niece made something inside Charlie soften. "She's lucky to have you." "You wore yellow to prom too," he said suddenly, his voice gentle with memory. "I remember thinking it made you look like sunrise." Charlie's breath caught, surprised by the unexpected remembrance and the warmth in his eyes. "You never told me that." "Some things a guy keeps to himself," he replied with a half-smile. His eyes held hers as the song slowed into something softer, the kind that made you lean in and close your eyes. "I'm the lucky one," he said quietly. They moved closer, the space between them charged with possibility. Charlie could feel the solid warmth of him, smell the clean scent of his aftershave mingled with summer air. For a heartbeat, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to rest her head against his shoulder, to let the years between them dissolve like mist in morning sun. As they swayed to the gentle melody, Mare Liz clinked a spoon against her glass, drawing everyone's attention to the small stage at the edge of the square. Reluctantly, Charlie and Ethan separated, turning toward the mare with the other couples. "Friends and neighbours," Mare Liz began, her voice warm and clear in the evening air. "What a blessing to gather together like this, under these stars that have watched over our little town for generations." She raised her glass. "Tonight, I want to toast to community, to the ties that bind us, the traditions that ground us, and the love that brings us home even when we wander." Her gaze found Charlie in the crowd. "And to second chances, because sometimes the path forward leads us right back to where we were always meant to be." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Charlie felt heat rise to her face as several people glanced her way, smiling knowingly. Beside her, Ethan shifted, his arm brushing against hers. "To Sweetbriar Ridge," Mare Liz concluded, "and to coming home." "To coming home," the crowd echoed, glasses raised. As conversations resumed and the band began playing again, Charlie felt her phone vibrate in her clutch. She tried to ignore it, but it buzzed again. And again. Ethan looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "Everything okay?" She glanced down at her purse, her heart suddenly racing. "I should check that. It might be important." Opening her clutch, she saw the name flashing on her screen, Marcus. Her stomach dropped. Without thinking, she stepped away and fished the phone out. "I need to... excuse me." Ethan's smile faded, but he nodded, watching as she retreated from the dance floor. Charlie slipped behind the bandstand, away from the music and light. She didn't answer, just stared at the screen until the call ended, then leaned back against the wood siding, heart pounding. What does he want now? She hadn't heard from Marcus since returning to Sweetbriar. His name flashing on her screen now, in this moment of fragile happiness, felt like a bucket of ice water. 3 missed calls in a row, that was Marcus, always assuming his urgency should be her priority. A text appeared. "Need to talk. Important. Call me." Charlie's fingers hovered over the screen. Part of her wanted to know what he considered important enough to interrupt her silence. The other part recognized the familiar pattern, the way he'd always pulled her back whenever she began to move forward. She considered deleting the text. Her thumb hovered over the trash icon. Then she turned the phone face down instead, sliding it back into her clutch. Not deleted, not answered, suspended in that uncertain space where she seemed to live these days. A low voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Running again. Ethan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression carefully neutral. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightness around his eyes. Charlie straightened, slipping the phone back into her purse. "I wasn't... It's not what you think. You bailed in the middle of a dance?" His voice was quiet, controlled. "My ex called." She hadn't meant to be so blunt, but there it was. He blinked. the one who cheated on you. Yes. Ethan's jaw tightened. And you answered? No, she said quickly. I didn't. I just panicked. Because you thought he might need you, or because you weren't sure if you wanted to hear from him. His words stung more than they should have. In the distance, the first firework whistled into the sky, bursting into a shower of blue sparks that reflected in Ethan's eyes. That's not fair, she said, crossing her arms. You don't know what it was like. You're right, I don't. He took a step closer. But I do know what it's like to watch someone walk away, to wonder if they ever really wanted to stay in the first place. The unspoken accusation hung between them, heavy as storm clouds. I didn't ask for this, Ethan, she said, her voice catching. I didn't come back to get tangled up again. Then why did you come back, Charlie? The music climbed behind them, full of warmth they could no longer share. Another firework cracked in the sky, painting their faces in momentary gold. She opened her mouth, closed it. The truth was both simple and impossibly complex. I came back because Mabel needed me. She doesn't. I know. Another firework exploded, bathing them in white light. In the brief illumination, Charlie saw something vulnerable flash across Ethan's face. Hope, perhaps, or fear. You came back, Ethan said, voice quieter now, because part of you still belongs here. Charlie swallowed. And part of me doesn't know what to do with that. They stood in silence, the sky bursting into colour above them, hearts tangled in threads of history and unspoken hope. In the distance, children squealed with delight at each explosion, their joy a stark contrast to the tension vibrating between the two adults. The thing is, Ethan continued, running a hand through his hair, I can't do this halfway, Charlie. I've got Gracie to think about. I can't let her get attached to someone who's got one foot out the door. That's not, isn't it? His eyes searched hers. Your ex calls, and the first thing you do is run. What happens when he decides he wants you back? When Chicago calls with some fancy job offer? Will you be gone before morning, like last time? The accusation hit its mark. Charlie felt heat rise to her face, anger and hurt tangling in her chest. That's not fair, and you know it. We were 18, Ethan. I had a full scholarship. What was I supposed to do? Write back, maybe. His voice rose slightly. Return a phone call, not disappear like the 10 years we'd known each other meant nothing. A couple wandered near them, then quickly retreated when they sensed the tension. In the sky, the fireworks display reached its crescendo, explosions of red, white, and blue, reflecting in the small pond at the edge of the square. I was scared, Charlie admitted, her voice barely audible above the noise. Terrified that if I looked back, I'd never have the courage to go forward. And now? Now I'm terrified that I spent 10 years going in the wrong direction. The honesty of her admission seemed to take them both by surprise. Ethan's expression softened, but before he could respond, a small voice called from the crowd. Uncle Ethan, where are you? You're missing the best part. He glanced over his shoulder to where Gracie was searching for him, her face upturned to the magnificent display overhead. When he turned back to Charlie, his expression was guarded again. I should get Gracie home. Ethan, wait. We both need some time to think, Charlie. He took a step back. I've got a little girl who needs stability. I can't afford to get this wrong. As he walked away, the first drops of rain began to fall, gentle at first, then more insistent. The crowd let out a collective groan as people scrambled to gather blankets and food. Charlie remained rooted to the spot, watching as Ethan found Gracie and lifted her onto his shoulders, pointing up at the final bursts of colour fighting against the encroaching rain. The little girl's delighted laughter carried across the square, twisting something deep in Charlie's chest. Her breath hitched. Just once. But it was enough. She straightened her spine, eyes burning with unshed tears she refused to let fall. This wasn't defeat. It was a reckoning. The rain fell harder now, dampening her hair and dress. Around her the square emptied as people rushed for shelter, leaving behind half-collapsed canopies and abandoned paper plates that grew soggy in the sudden downpour. Charlotte Evans! Mabel's voice called from beneath a large umbrella. Get over here before you catch your death. But Charlie couldn't move. The rain felt cleansing somehow, washing away the brittle mask she'd been wearing since she arrived in Sweetbriar, since before that even. Across the square, Ethan glanced back at her once more. For a moment he seemed about to return, perhaps to offer his jacket or share his umbrella. His fingers curled instinctively around her name, but the syllables stayed caught in his throat. Their eyes locked across the distance, but Charlie turned away first, unable to bear the mixture of concern and wariness in his gaze. She began walking in the opposite direction, away from Mabel's calls, away from the dispersing crowd, away from Ethan and all the complicated feelings he stirred in her. The rain soaked through her sundress, plastering it to her skin, but she barely noticed. Her mind was too full of Ethan's accusations, of Marcus's unwelcome intrusion, of the truth she'd finally spoken aloud. Now I'm terrified that I spent 10 years going in the wrong direction. She wandered to the edge of the pond where children had been sailing paper boats earlier in the day. The fireworks had ended, leaving behind only the scent of gunpowder mingling with rain and wet grass. A few abandoned boats listed in the water, their paper sides growing heavy with moisture. Like her, they'd started with direction and purpose, only to end up adrift. 10 years forward, 2 steps back, 1 paper boat, already sinking, she whispered to herself, watching as one of the little vessels finally surrendered to the weight of the rain and slipped beneath the surface. From a distance, sheltered beneath the awning of the gazebo, Ethan watched her. Gracie sat beside him wrapped in his jacket, munching on a cookie she'd rescued before the rain hit. "Why is Miss Charlie standing in the rain?" she asked, following his gaze. Ethan sighed, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. Sometimes people need space to think. "She looks sad." "Yeah, kiddo, I think she is." "Did you make her sad?" He winced at the direct question. "Maybe. Sometimes grown-ups make each other sad without meaning to." Gracie considered this, her small face serious in the dim light. "You should go say sorry. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Ethan watched as Charlie stood motionless in the rain, her blonde hair darkened to honey gold, her shoulders straight despite the weight of water soaking her dress. Even drenched in rain and shadows, she stole the breath from his chest like no time had passed at all. And that terrified him. "Because sometimes sorry isn't enough," he said quietly. "Sometimes you have to be sure you won't make the same mistake again." "Is that what Miss Charlie did? Made a mistake?" "We both did, Gracie girl." He wrapped an arm around her small shoulders. "A long time ago." Across the square, Charlie finally turned and began walking toward her grandmother's house, each step leaving small puddles in her wake. The rain had eased to a gentle mist, but she was already drenched through. She didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen Ethan step out from the shelter of the gazebo, one hand half raised as if to call her name. The moment blinked out like the last spark of a firework, leaving only smoke where possibility had been. Above them, the sky cleared just enough to reveal a single star, bright and unwavering in the darkness. A promise, perhaps, that even the stormiest nights eventually give way to morning. Chapter 6. A Little Girl's Wish. The next morning dawned gentle and gold. The orchard dripped with dew, and a chorus of robins sang the town awake. Charlie stood at the edge of Mabel's porch, nursing her coffee, mind still whirling from the fireworks and Ethan's words the night before. She hadn't slept well. Her mind kept looping the fireworks, his voice the way he'd looked at her just before turning away, the rain soaking through her dress, the sinking paper boats. Not because of Marcus, not even because of Ethan, if she were honest, but because of the way her heart felt caught, like a leaf swirling between 2 winds. A creak behind her made her glance over. Gracie stepped onto the porch, pajamas covered in cartoon apples, glasses askew, hair a tousled mess. She rubbed one eye and yawned. Charlie smiled. "Hey, kiddo. Up early." "I smelled cinnamon toast," Gracie said, then hesitated beside Charlie. "Are you sad?" Charlie blinked, startled by the child's perception. How could someone so young read her so clearly when she barely understood herself? What makes you ask that? Gracie shrugged, looking out at the orchard. You have a sad mouth. My art teacher says people's mouths tell stories their eyes try to hide. Charlie looked at the girl, stunned. That's very wise. Gracie picked at a splinter on the railing. Uncle Ethan used to smile more. When I first moved in, he smiled every morning just to help me forget. But now he only smiles when you're around. Charlie's breath caught. I think he misses being happy, Gracie continued. I think you make him remember. Before Charlie could respond, the little girl gave her a quick hug and disappeared back inside. Charlie stared at the porch floor, emotions swirling. What if Ethan wasn't ready to hear her? What if she'd already caused too much damage? The thought of walking across the field to his property made her stomach tighten with anxiety. But staying here, letting another day pass with that hurt between them, felt worse. She didn't want fear to win again, so she buttoned her jacket, grabbed the cinnamon rolls from Mabel's counter, and walked. The morning air cooled her cheeks as she crossed the field, dew soaking the edges of her shoes. Her steps slowed as Ethan's workshop came into view. Twice she almost turned back. Once she actually stopped, fingers tightening around the bakery bag, remembering the hurt in his eyes when he'd asked if she had 1 foot out the door. But the memory of Gracie's words pushed her forward. Ethan's workshop sat nestled at the edge of his property, smoke curling gently from the small chimney. It smelled of cedar, sawdust, and quiet determination. Tools hung with almost military precision along the walls, but a child's watercolor painting was thumbtacked to the center beam like a shrine. The space was organized yet lived in, much like the man himself. The door creaked open as Charlie stepped inside, finding him bent over a workbench, hands sawdust-streaked, a half-carved beam in his grip. Sunlight filtered through dust motes, catching in his hair. He glanced up, surprised. Didn't expect to see you today. I come bearing peace. She held up a white flag, literally one of Gracie's old painting rags tied to a twig, and a white bakery bag. Daisy-chain cinnamon rolls. Still warm. Ethan's lips twitched. That's supposed to make me surrender? No, she said softly. It's supposed to mean I want to try again. He set down his tool, wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his back pocket. I was working on the support beams for the welcome arch. Figured it's safer if we don't ask the middle schoolers to build it again. Charlie walked over, brushing sawdust from a plank. Her eyes drifted to the watercolor painting. Blues and yellows swirled together in what might have been a sky. That's beautiful. Ethan's gaze followed hers. First one she did after moving in, said it was happy blue. His voice softened. Hung it the day she painted it. Never took it down. Charlie nodded, understanding all he wasn't saying. Need a second set of hands? They worked side by side, measuring, sawing, fitting beams. Their movements slowly returned to a shared rhythm. One learned long ago through late-night study sessions, treehouse repairs, and years of unspoken language. Words weren't necessary as they found their way back to each other through the simple act of creation. Ethan grunted, trying to hold a beam upright. You're still short. I'm still taller than Gracie. Barely. She rolled her eyes and grabbed a crate to stand on. How's this? Better. Still short. She smacked his arm with a length of ribbon. Hush. They laughed, the sound real, effortless, the kind of laugh that healed. Later they stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. Charlie leaned against the porch post. You're good at this. Building things. Grew up with it, Ethan said. Dad had me framing barns by the time I was 12. He looked out across the field, gaze distant. My sister used to paint while I worked. She'd sit in the grass and hum little songs, brush flicking like magic. Then when Gracie was born, she started painting again. She was doing better, but postpartum hit hard. No one knew. Charlie swallowed, heart tightening. She drove into the hills one morning, took her favorite paints, never came back. The hammer he'd been holding slipped from his grip, clattering to the wooden boards with a sound that echoed his breaking voice. We found her truck by the overlook. There was a painting inside, of Gracie's smile. Charlie stepped closer, hand finding his. Ethan. He looked down, eyes rimmed red. Some days, I still expect her to walk through the door, fussing about the mess. Charlie said nothing, just pressed her hand tighter into his. Gracie doesn't remember much, he whispered. But I see her in every colour she picks. Tears slid down Charlie's cheek, slow and silent. They sat on the porch swing, not talking, just breathing. The chain creaked softly, swaying them like leaves on a branch, dusk thickening the air like velvet. Stars blinked into view, and crickets began their lullaby. "Remember how we used to count stars from your dad's old hay wagon?" Charlie murmured, her voice barely disturbing the quiet. "We always lost count somewhere after 100. Ethan's lips curved slightly. "You'd always claim you saw a shooting star, even when you didn't." "I wanted to make wishes," she admitted, smiling through the remnants of tears. At some point her head slipped onto his shoulder. At some point his arm curved around her, drawing her closer. At some point her fingers drifted down, brushing against his wrist, finding the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. And at some point they both drifted into a quiet, dreamless sleep, hearts beating in tandem beneath the watchful stars. In her dreams, Charlie stood in an orchard, surrounded by apple blossoms. The petals drifted down like snow, and somewhere nearby, a child laughed. She felt warm, safe, home. Sunlight warmed Charlie's cheeks. Birds chirped too brightly. Her neck ached from the odd angle. She blinked awake to find herself still curled on the porch swing, Ethan beside her, arm around her, both still dressed in yesterday's clothes. His steady breathing brushed warm against her hair. A throat cleared. Charlie sat up so fast she nearly fell. Across the street, Mrs. Dobbins waved with a knowing smile. "Good morning, lovebirds. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her 2 corgis sat beside her like tiny, disapproving chaperones. Ethan groaned, rubbing his face. "We're going to be town gossip before breakfast." Charlie winced. "You don't think anyone else saw, do you?" Ethan pointed across the field. "Look left." Charlie turned and spotted Missy, the cafe owner, snapping a photo on her phone and giving a gleeful thumbs up. "Oh no. Oh yes." They shared a look, then burst out laughing. By the time Charlie returned to Mabel's, she found her grandmother in the kitchen, humming with glee, stirring a pot of grits like it was a potion of triumph. She was already cutting a slice of peach pie for Missy, who perched at the counter with her phone. "She earned it," Mabel told Charlie without shame. "You look rested," Mabel added, not looking up from her stirring. "I fell asleep on Ethan's porch." "I know." Charlie narrowed her eyes. "How do you—" "Half the town knows, sugar. Missy sent me a photo. It's adorable." "You're glowing again." Charlie groaned. Mabel only grinned wider. Later, Charlie found herself back at Ethan's house, trying not to feel awkward as he scrambled eggs in the kitchen. "You don't have to make breakfast. You helped me build an arch. I owe you scrambled gratitude." She perched on a stool. "You still like cinnamon in your coffee?" "I do." She raised her brows. "Still think that's weird." He slid a mug toward her. She took a sip and paused. "This is how I take it." Ethan shrugged, smiling without looking up. "Still 2 sugars, no cream," he said. Same as prom night. Charlie felt something inside her shift, warm and aching. She hadn't realized how much it would matter, that someone remembered something small, something soft, that amid all the years and changes, he'd carried this tiny detail of her with him, like a river stone worn smooth in his pocket. And in the quiet that followed, they ate together. 2 souls bruised and healing, beginning to believe in soft mornings and second chances. As she watched him move around the kitchen, Charlie remembered Gracie's words from that morning, that Uncle Ethan would be happy again. Charlie wasn't sure where they were headed, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe, just maybe, they all had a chance at that little girl's wish coming true. Chapter 7. Broken Bridges Rebuilt. The scent of smoke drifted into the morning air before the sirens ever reached town square. Charlie stood outside the community centre, clipboard in hand, reviewing booth assignments when the sound pierced the quiet. She turned sharply, heart sinking as a fire truck tore past Main Street, its wailing echoing between the storefronts. People gathered quickly. Whispers turned to cries. And then they saw it. Miller's Bakery. The once charming brick shop that had served generations of Sweetbriar Ridge with cinnamon rolls, birthday cakes, and wedding pies, was belching smoke from shattered windows. Flames licked up from the rear kitchen, firefighters swarming like bees around the century-old building. Charlie ran toward the crowd, stopping beside Ethan and Gracie, who stood solemnly on the curb. Her stomach twisted at the sight of Mr. Miller, his face smudged with soot, shoulders slumped as he watched his family legacy crumble before his eyes. "Is anyone inside?" she asked, breathless. Ethan shook his head. They got the Millers out just in time. Electrical fire. It spread fast. The sight punched Charlie in the chest. This wasn't just a shop. It was Sweetbriar's oven-warm heart. The warm sugar scent that had drifted from the doorway every October. The pie lattice lessons she'd begged Mrs. Miller to give her before senior prom. The tiny cupcakes Mr. Miller had crafted for her mother's wake, refusing payment with tears in his eyes. It wasn't just a bakery, it was part of her story. "We need a backup," someone murmured behind her. "There's no pie stand without the Millers." "The whole east corner of the festival is centered around their booth," another voice added. Charlie turned slowly, already flipping through her mental Rolodex. What if we shift the pie contest to the orchard? Bring in mobile ovens, ask for volunteers to bake off-site? She caught Ethan's surprised glance but pressed on. "Missy can cover desserts at the cafe. I'll call my event contacts from Chicago. Maybe someone has extra kitchen trailers. We can convert the gazebo lawn into a makeshift cafe for the day. It won't be the same, but it'll be something." People stared, then nodded, then started moving. Mayor Liz stepped forward. "Charlie's right. We've got 3 days. If everyone pitches in." "I can loan tables from the bookstore," Ethan offered. "The garden club has awnings," Mrs. Dobbins added. A cascade of offers followed, and Charlie found herself at the centre of it all, assigning tasks, building lists, creating order from chaos. The same skills that once kept her climbing in Chicago were now rebuilding Sweetbriar. Ethan watched it all unfold, the calm in her voice, the command in her posture, the spark in her eyes as she organised a community response. This wasn't the uncertain woman who'd arrived on Mabel's doorstep weeks ago. She wasn't just here. She was part of this. Later that afternoon, the two of them stood beneath the gazebo by the pond, hands full of nails and wood polish. The structure had weathered too many storms and sagged on one side. It was scheduled for repair next month. Charlie had moved that up to today. "If this thing collapses on the mayor during her welcome speech, we're both toast," she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her wrist. Ethan chuckled, holding a beam in place while she secured it. "You'll be fine. You'll charm your way out of it." Charlie smirked. "So now you're saying I'm charming?" "I'm saying," he replied, stepping closer, "that you're a force when you care about something." Their eyes met, and for a moment neither looked away. The air between them felt charged, like the moments before a summer storm. Charlie reached up to secure a bracket, stretching toward a beam just beyond her grasp. Her foot slipped on the damp wood, balance faltering. Ethan caught her elbow with one hand, his grip sure and steady. He pulled her back to safety but didn't release her immediately. The contact lingered, his thumb brushing against her skin. "Careful," he murmured, voice low. "These old boards are tricky." Charlie nodded, pulse quickening at his nearness. "Thanks." They worked in companionable silence, hammers tapping in rhythm, the scent of fresh-cut wood rising between them. Charlie found herself relaxing into the familiar cadence they'd established in his workshop days before. This felt right, building something together, shoulder to shoulder. As they paused for water, Charlie sat on the edge of the gazebo, legs swinging slightly. The late afternoon sun painted the trees in gold, catching in the ripples of the pond. "Marcus cheated on me," she said quietly, eyes on the horizon. With my boss. Ethan stilled, water bottle halfway to his lips. I found out in the worst way. An accident. An email thread he didn't delete. Photos. A message about how I was too ambitious and too cold, like being driven was some kind of flaw. She didn't look at Ethan, afraid of seeing pity in his eyes. Her fingers traced the weathered wood beneath her. Instead, he sat beside her, hand resting gently over hers. Warm, steady. The weight of it anchored her to the moment. You didn't deserve that, he said, voice low with conviction. Not one bit of it. I thought I did. For choosing work over love. For not being... Enough. He squeezed her fingers. You were trying to survive in a place that didn't see you. That's not cold. That's strength. Charlie's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away, determined not to cry twice in 1 week. When he called at the festival, I panicked. Not because I wanted to answer, but because I was afraid of what he might say. That maybe he was right about me all along. Ethan turned toward her, his free hand lifting her chin until she met his gaze. Charlie Evans, I've known you since you were 7 years old with pigtails and scraped knees. You have never, not once, been too much of anything except maybe too brave for your own good. A giggle rang out behind them. They turned to see Gracie trotting toward them, paper bag in hand, pigtails bouncing with each step. Lunch delivery, she announced proudly. Auntie Mabel said you'd forget to eat. Again? She handed them sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, then beamed at the gazebo. You're building things together now? Ethan chuckled. Trying to, kiddo. Gracie tilted her head, studying them with that unnerving perceptiveness children sometimes possess. You look happy, Uncle E. He glanced at Charlie, surprised, thoughtful. Then he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Yeah, I suppose I do. Gracie nodded, satisfied, then skipped back toward the path. Auntie Mabel says don't be late for dinner. We're having apple dumplings. Charlie unwrapped her sandwich. Egg salad with dill, her childhood favourite. Of course Mabel remembered. Your niece sees right through everyone, you know. Terrifying, isn't it? Ethan said, bumping his shoulder against hers. Makes me wonder what else she notices. By late afternoon, clouds rolled in thick and dark. Charlie and Ethan had just stored the tools in the small shed when thunder cracked above them, followed by a flash of lightning that illuminated the gathering storm. Run or hide? Ethan asked, eyeing the distance to Mabel's house. Charlie pointed to the stone structure on the hill. Mill, closest shelter. They dashed across the field, rain beginning to pelt down as they ran. By the time they reached the old grain mill, they were laughing and breathless, hair plastered to their faces. Ethan pushed open the heavy wooden door, and they tumbled inside just as the skies opened fully. Inside, the air smelled like old wheat and cedar. Dust motes floated in dim golden light that filtered through the broken slats. Rain drummed against the roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. They sank onto a pile of old burlap sacks, soaked and breathless. That was nostalgic, Charlie said between laughs, wringing water from her hair. Reminded me of chasing you through the orchard when you stole my apple fritter. You tried to trade it for a dare. I stand by my choices. They chuckled, breath slowing as the laughter faded. Charlie looked around, memories surfacing of teenage hideouts and forbidden adventures. Remember when we snuck in here during that summer storm? Senior year? Ethan's smile softened. You were afraid of the lightning? I was not, she protested. Then, at his knowing look, okay, maybe a little. A beat passed between them. Ethan's gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there. You still smell like cinnamon when it rains. Charlie's breath hitched. You still remember that? His hand brushed a wet curl from her face, fingers grazing her cheek. The touch sent warmth cascading through her, despite her rain-soaked clothes. The distance between them dissolved. Charlie could count the raindrops clinging to his eyelashes, see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. Their faces drew close, breath mingling. This wasn't infatuation or simple attraction. It was years of shared silences, of laughter and pain and porch swing breakfasts. It was knowing his coffee order and the way his jaw clenched when he was worried. This was something already halfway home, a return rather than a beginning. The mill hushed around them, only the rain. Then, a loud creak. The door swung open. "Hello?" Miss Grafton called into the gloom, flashlight slicing through shadows. "Someone left tools outside and—" "Oh, well, isn't this familiar?" Charlie jerked back, cheeks blazing as the beam of light caught them. Ethan groaned under his breath. "We really need quieter hiding spots," Miss Grafton tisked, her grey curls bobbing as she shook her head. "Well, don't mind me. Just checking for squatters and scandal. Though I must say this takes me back to 2009. Wasn't it the band room closet then? My, how you two find ways to be caught." She backed out dramatically, pulling the door shut with a wink. "Carry on, pretend I was never here." Charlie looked at Ethan, mortification giving way to humour, then burst out laughing. He joined in, shaking his head. Has she always had timing that terrible? "Remember when she caught us practicing for the spring dance? In your garage?" "And assumed we were—" "Yes," Charlie snorted. "And told your mother." They dissolved into laughter again, the almost kiss suspended between them like a drop of honey, sweet, lingering, but not quite falling. "Well," he said finally, voice warm with amusement and something deeper. "Maybe next time we get stuck in the rain, we lock the door first." Next time. The words hung in the air, a promise neither was ready to examine too closely. But Charlie found herself hoping, truly hoping, there would be a next time. Outside, the rain began to soften. Sunlight broke through the clouds, sending shafts of gold through the cracks in the mill walls, like hope finding its way through even the most weathered defences. Chapter 8. Secrets and Apple Blossoms. By Monday morning, the whispers had grown legs and wandered down every lane in Sweetbriar Ridge. Charlie Evans was staying. She didn't have to say it out loud. She hadn't packed. She hadn't booked a return flight. She was organising meetings, drafting festival banners, and attending school fundraisers. People noticed. The talk came with sideways glances, hopeful smiles, and, in one case, a loaf of cinnamon swirl bread delivered to Mabel's porch with a note that read, "Stay. We need you more than Chicago ever did." Charlie chuckled when she read it, but something about the message stuck like honey to her thoughts. She traced the handwriting, Mrs. Dobbins most likely, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. To be needed, to be wanted, not for her productivity or her networking skills, but simply for being herself. She'd started dreaming of blueprints. Orchard lighting, not hotel lobbies. She hadn't opened her work email in 4 days. That alone should have been a clue. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed with a Chicago area code. She almost didn't answer. "Charlie, hey!" came the unmistakable voice of her boss, Claire Hastings, all corporate cheer and veiled urgency. "Quick update. We've decided to fast-track the Quincy project. Major visibility. If you're back by Friday, we'll lock you in as lead." Charlie's stomach flipped. The Quincy project. Luxury hotels with eco-friendly designs. The account she'd helped land 6 months ago through sheer determination and 3 sleepless nights. "Claire, Look, I know you're on your small-town sabbatical or whatever, but this is the opportunity. Vice President's already asking about your availability. And between us? The board thinks you've earned a shot at creative director." The words hit like an avalanche. Creative director. The position she'd targeted in her 5-year plan. The corner office with the view of Lake Michigan. The salary that would finally let her buy that brownstone she'd been eyeing. She said she'd call back, then hung up and sat in silence. When she finally spoke, it was to Mabel, at the kitchen table over slices of pie and cups of tea that had long gone cold. "I don't know what to do." Mabel stirred her tea, eyes steady. "Do you want the job?" Charlie hesitated. "I wanted it for years. And now? I want peace, purpose." Her voice softened. "Someone to come home to." Mabel smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling with knowing wisdom. "Then the question isn't what you want. It's where you want it." Before Charlie could answer, Ethan's voice floated in from the porch. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," he said, stepping through the screen door, the hinges creaking in protest. "But it's good to know your exit plan's still an option." His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. They held a guarded wariness that made Charlie's chest ache. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't say. Then he set the basket down, more gently than he felt, and stepped back. "Ethan, you don't owe me an explanation." He set a basket of fresh green beans on the counter, a delivery from his garden, no doubt. Charlie stood. "That's not fair." "No," he said, brushing past her toward the door. "It's familiar." The screen door slammed behind him with a finality that echoed in the sudden silence. Mabel sighed. That boy always did lead with his fear. Charlie stared at the door, conflict churning inside her. "He thinks I'm leaving." "Are you?" She didn't answer. She didn't know. The next day brought unexpected chaos. Charlie was knee-deep in festival logistics, sorting through vendor applications at the community centre when her phone rang. Sweetbriar Elementary flashed on the screen. Gracie's school called mid-morning. A fever. Dizziness. She'd fainted briefly during art. Charlie didn't hesitate. She grabbed her purse and ran, leaving half-finished paperwork scattered across the table. The drive to the small clinic at the edge of town was a blur of worry and quiet prayers. She arrived before Ethan. The receptionist recognized her immediately. Small towns had their advantages. "She's asking for you," the woman said, ushering Charlie back. "We couldn't reach Mr. Foster right away." Charlie knelt beside the examination table, brushing damp curls from Gracie's forehead, whispering comfort. The little girl's face was flushed with fever, her glasses sitting forgotten on the side table. "Hey, little apple," Charlie murmured, using the nickname that had developed over their baking sessions. "I'm right here." Gracie's eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever. "Charlie? My head hurts." "I know, sweetheart. The doctor's going to make it better." When Ethan arrived, pale and breathless, he found them like that, Charlie singing softly, stroking Gracie's hair while the little girl clung to her hand. "She was asking for you," the nurse said to Charlie. "Wouldn't calm down until she saw you." A flash of something, gratitude mixed with confusion, crossed Ethan's face before he rushed to Gracie's side. They sat on either side of the bed, hours passing as they waited on blood work and IV fluids. It wasn't serious. A virus, the doctor said, but it shook them both. Charlie watched Ethan's face, the tight set of his jaw, the way he barely blinked as he watched Gracie sleep. "You're good with her," he said finally, voice rough with emotion. Charlie squeezed Gracie's hand gently. "She makes it easy." By midnight, Gracie stirred. Charlie smoothed her hand gently. "Hey there, Peanut." Gracie's eyes fluttered open. She looked from Charlie to Ethan, then whispered, voice hoarse with sleep and medication. "Are you my new mommy now?" The room froze. Ethan looked like he'd been punched in the gut, his face a complex tangle of emotions. Charlie's heart cracked open. She smiled softly and kissed Gracie's forehead. "No, sweetheart, I'm just someone who loves you a lot." Gracie nodded once, then drifted back to sleep, her small hand still clutched in Charlie's. Charlie stepped into the hallway, breath shallow, heart pounding. She leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the weight of Gracie's innocent question. Ethan followed moments later. "I didn't mean, she doesn't—" He ran a hand through his hair, words failing him. "She's confused," Charlie said gently, "and I don't blame her." He nodded. "She's never called anyone that before." I didn't know what to say. "You said the right thing." His voice was quiet, almost reverent. They stood in silence, the kind that carried weight and possibility. The sterile hospital lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the exhaustion in his eyes. Ethan's voice broke the stillness. "I don't know what this is. Us. But she clearly sees something." Charlie turned, voice quiet. "So do I." He didn't reply, but his hand found hers in the dim hallway, fingers intertwining. They stood there, connected by touch and silent understanding until the doctor returned with discharge papers. The next day, after Gracie was settled at home with Mabel keeping watch, Charlie wandered into the orchard, needing air and answers. The blossoms were in full bloom now, soft petals fluttering around her like confetti. The wind whispered through the branches like secrets waiting to be told. She sat beneath the old tree swing, eyes brimming with unshed tears. Walk away from Gracie's trust, from Ethan's steady presence, from the person she was becoming here. She could almost see herself standing on that Chicago balcony, glass of wine in hand, email glowing. Empty skyline. No Ethan, no Gracie, no apple blossoms, just the hollow victory of a title she'd once craved and the echo of her own footsteps in an empty apartment. Could she build a life here, without sacrificing who she was? She wasn't sure. Her phone weighed heavy in her pocket. Claire would be waiting for an answer. The Quincy project wouldn't wait forever. Creative director wouldn't remain vacant. And then she looked up. Ethan stood across the field, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. The afternoon sun caught in his hair, turning it gold at the edges. He looked solid, steady, like the land itself. He stepped closer, slow and careful, until he was standing beside her beneath the blooming tree. "I was a coward," he said softly. "Hearing you might leave again. It scared the hell out of me." She looked up at him, shielding her eyes from the dappled sunlight. "I didn't say I was leaving." "I know, but I didn't want to wait to hear it." He sank down beside her on the grass. "All these years I told myself I was over it, that you leaving was just part of growing up." A blossom drifted down, landing on his knee. He brushed it away absently. "But seeing you walk through Mabel's door that first day, it was like the decade between never happened. And that terrified me, Charlie. Because if you still had that power after all this time, you'd have to admit you never stopped caring," she finished for him. Their eyes met, and the honesty there nearly took her breath away. Charlie stood, breath trembling. This place, you, Gracie. It's starting to feel like home. His hand reached for hers, drawing her up until they stood face to face beneath the canopy of blossoms. "And if you stay, it'll never stop." Their eyes met, years of what-ifs and almosts swirling between them. Sunlight filtered through the branches, casting them in a gentle, ethereal glow. Then he bent, lips brushing hers softly, reverently. A question, a prayer. The orchard fell silent. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Charlie's hand rose to his cheek, answering his question with a tender touch. Their kiss deepened, a slow unfolding like petals in bloom. His arms circled her waist, drawing her closer until she could feel his heartbeat against her own. It wasn't their first kiss that had been years ago, behind the high school after a football game, clumsy and sweet, but this was a homecoming. A recognition. Two people who had walked separate paths only to find themselves exactly where they were meant to be. When they finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. Her eyes remained closed, savoring the moment, committing it to memory. "No more running," she whispered. "No more doubts," he replied. Only the apple blossoms answered, falling gently around them like nature's blessing. One landed in her hair and Ethan carefully plucked it away, his fingertips lingering against her cheek. "Stay," he said simply. Not a demand. A hope. And for the first time since she'd returned to Sweetbriar Ridge, Charlie knew exactly where she belonged. Chapter 9. Heart on the Line. Morning light spilled through the curtains of Mabel's guest room, painting Charlie's face in gold. She'd been awake for hours, fingers tracing her lips, remembering. The orchard, the apple blossoms. Ethan. The kiss had changed everything and nothing. Like flipping the last piece of a puzzle into place. Satisfying, yet somehow incomplete. What came next? What were they to each other now? She pulled herself from bed and padded to the kitchen, where Mabel was already bustling about, humming as she stirred batter for pancakes. "You're glowing," Mabel observed without looking up. "Finally kissed him, did you?" Charlie nearly choked on her coffee. "How did you—" "Please," Mabel waved her wooden spoon. "The whole town's been running a betting pool on when you two would come to your senses. Ruth Grafton just won $20. Charlie laughed, then sobered. "I don't know what we are, Mabel." "You're two people who've loved each other longer than you've admitted it," Mabel said simply. "The rest is just details." Those details, however, felt monumental when Charlie arrived at Ethan's workshop later that morning. Festival planning had reached a fever pitch, and they had decorations to finalize. He looked up when she entered, his smile warm but guarded. "Hey," he said, setting down his sanding block. "Hey, yourself." She fidgeted with her notebook. "About yesterday." Ethan's shoulders tensed slightly. "Which part? The part where my niece asked if you were her new mother, or the part where I kissed you under the apple trees like we were in some kind of romance novel?" There it was, that wall of humour he built when emotions ran too deep. "Both, I guess," Charlie said, stepping closer. "Ethan, what are we doing?" "I haven't felt that safe in years," he almost said. But safety was dangerous, safer to stay uncertain. He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Charlie. I know what I want. I just don't know if I can have it." "What does that mean?" His eyes met hers, vulnerable and raw. "It means I have Gracie to think about. It means I've already watched one woman I love walk away. It means I'm terrified of building something that might collapse." The word hung between them. Love. So casually dropped, yet so immense. "I'm not Sarah," Charlie said softly, "and I'm not 18 anymore." "I know." He reached for her hand, his touch hesitant. "I just need a little time to be sure this is real." Charlie nodded, understanding the fear behind his words. "We've got time." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "So, friends who occasionally kiss under apple trees?" She smiled. "For now." "Fairy tales," Charlie announced at the planning committee meeting that afternoon. "Not just any festival theme, an enchanted celebration. Lanterns in the trees, a wishing well by the pond, storybook characters. The children can dress up, and we'll have a twilight dance beneath the stars." Mayor Liz beamed. "I love it. Sweetbriar's own enchanted forest." Ideas flowed freely after that. Flower crowns, wooden signposts pointing to imaginary realms, strings of lights transforming the orchard into something magical. "We'll need a demonstration for the dance," someone suggested. "Get people excited." Before she could think better of it, Charlie volunteered. "Ethan and I could prepare something for the children." Eyes turned to Ethan, who looked momentarily startled before nodding. "Sure, I've been told I clean up nicely." Laughter rippled through the room, and Charlie felt a flicker of excitement. Dancing with Ethan again, properly this time, not just swaying at the town cookout. She remembered how his hand had felt at her waist, steady and warm. The schoolhouse auditorium echoed with their footsteps as they practiced. Charlie counted beats while Ethan followed her lead, his movements becoming more fluid with each attempt. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, she instructed, guiding him through a gentle turn. "Imagine the music swelling around us." "I'm imagining not stepping on your toes," he quipped, but his eyes were intent on learning the steps. They practiced until sunset streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. As Ethan spun her outward and then back into his arms, something shifted between them, like puzzle pieces aligning. "You're getting good at this," she murmured as he dipped her slightly. His smile was boyish, pleased. "Good teacher." Breathless, they drew apart, and Charlie felt the loss of his touch immediately. "Again?" she asked. He nodded. "Again." Saturday morning found them in Ethan's kitchen with Gracie, crafting paper lanterns and fairy crowns for the festival booth. Glitter covered every surface despite Charlie's attempts at containment. "I'm making yours extra sparkly," Gracie informed Charlie solemnly, applying another generous coat of adhesive and silver dust. "That's very generous of you," Charlie replied, already imagining glitter in her hair for days. Ethan watched from the doorway, coffee mug in hand, expression soft. You two are a menace with craft supplies. Uncle Ethan needs glitter too, Gracie declared, rushing toward him with sticky hands outstretched. What followed was chaos. Ethan dodging, Gracie pursuing, and an upended container of pink glitter showering them all. For a moment, stunned silence. Then Gracie's giggles erupted, followed by Charlie's laughter, and finally, Ethan's deep chuckle. Now we're all fairy royalty, Charlie gasped between laughs, brushing glitter from her shirt. Ethan's eyes caught hers across the room, twinkling with mirth and something deeper. Some look better with crowns than others, he said softly. Later, while Gracie napped, exhausted from her glitter conquest, Charlie and Ethan attempted to salvage the kitchen. It's a lost cause, Charlie sighed, surveying the sparkling disaster. This place will twinkle for generations. Worth it, Ethan said, setting down his broom. I haven't heard her laugh like that in ages. Charlie paused her sweeping. She's a special kid. You're good with her? He leaned against the counter. It's nice, seeing you together. Is that your way of saying you don't mind me sticking around? His expression grew serious. More like I'm starting to count on it. The weight of his words settled between them, heavy with implication. Charlie reached for his hand, linking their fingers gently. Good, because I'm thinking maybe we've all got something here. Something worth holding on to. He squeezed her hand in silent agreement. The call came Wednesday morning, just as Charlie was finalizing the festival program. Charlotte Evans. This is Victoria Reed from Heritage Revitalization Group. Mayor Patterson from Millfield gave me your contact information. I understand you're doing remarkable work with Sweetbriar Ridge's Apple Festival. Charlie frowned, surprised. I'm just helping out. It's the community doing the real work. That's not what I hear. Listen, I'll cut to the chase. We're looking for someone to head up our small-town restoration projects, breathing life back into America's forgotten main streets. Your background in design and events, combined with your apparent talent for community engagement, makes you perfect. Charlie's pulse quickened. That's flattering, but I already have a job in Chicago. Had, from what I understand. Sabbatical, wasn't it? Look, this isn't corporate rat race work. It's meaningful. And you'd be based in the region, able to stay near your roots while still growing professionally. The pay is competitive. Think about it. We're not far from Sweetbriar. After hanging up, Charlie sat motionless. It was like the universe was offering a third option. Not Chicago's cold ambition, not small-town limitation, but something balanced. What if she could have both? The old schoolhouses, the apple festivals, the sense of impact, without feeling trapped. A life that wasn't about escaping, but about building something that mattered. She could help other towns find their heartbeat again, while keeping her own anchored here. She called Victoria back and asked for details to be emailed, just to consider, just in case. That evening, Charlie pulled her suitcase from under Mabel's guest bed. Not to pack, just to organize. Her Chicago clothes had sat rumpled for weeks. If she were staying, they needed proper storage. If she were considering Victoria's offer, she should know what professional attire she still had. She was folding a blouse when the door creaked open. Ethan stood in the doorway, a small box in his hands. His eyes darted from Charlie to the open suitcase on the bed, and his expression shifted from hopeful to carefully blank. Her stomach dropped. Not because of the job, but because of the look in his eyes, the one that said, I knew this would happen. Gracie made you something, he said, setting the box on the dresser. For the dance demonstration. Charlie looked up, suddenly aware of how this appeared. Ethan, I'm not... Are you planning your escape again? He asked quietly. No accusation, just resignation, as if he'd been expecting this all along. No, I'm just organizing. I haven't opened this suitcase since I arrived. He nodded, but his eyes remained guarded. Got a call today, from Ruth at the real estate office. Said someone from Heritage Revitalization called, asking about property values near Sweetbriar. Mentioned your name. Charlie's heart sank. Small towns. Nothing stayed private. They offered me a job, she admitted. Regional work, helping revitalize small towns. It's not Chicago. It would be closer. But not here. I don't know yet. I just got the call today. Ethan nodded again, that careful, measured movement that hid a storm beneath. Right. Well, just let us know what you decide. Us. Not me. Us. Him and Gracie. The family she was starting to imagine herself part of. Ethan, wait. But he was already heading for the door. Dance practice tomorrow at 4. If you're still here. The door closed softly behind him, somehow worse than if he'd slammed it. Charlie sank onto the bed, the half-folded blouse crumpled in her hands. She hadn't decided anything. She'd only asked for information. But in Ethan's eyes, she'd already packed her bags. She glanced at the small box he'd left. Inside lay a delicate corsage made from paper flowers, lovingly, if imperfectly crafted, with a note in Gracie's careful handwriting. For the princess dance. Love, Gracie. Charlie closed her eyes, tears threatening. Her heart was on the line now, not just for a job, not just for a man, for a life she didn't know she was brave enough to choose. Chapter 10. The Fall Before the Rise. The festival was only 2 weeks away, and Sweetbriar Ridge hummed with anticipation. Autumn had painted the town in amber and gold, leaves crunching underfoot as volunteers bustled about the orchard. The scent of cinnamon and apples wafted from Missy's Cafe, where handwritten signs advertised Festival Special, Apple Cider Donuts. Charlie checked items off her clipboard with focused precision. String lights, being hung by the Johnson brothers. Welcome banner, Ruth and the quilting circle had finished it yesterday. Dance platform. That was Ethan's domain. Her heart fluttered at the thought of him, then sank just as quickly. Things had been strained since he'd found her with the open suitcase. They worked together efficiently, spoke cordially, but the easy warmth between them had cooled to something cautious. The Heritage Revitalization Group email sat unopened in her inbox, like a splinter beneath her skin. Those fairy lights need to be higher, she called to Max, one of the teenage volunteers. We want them to look like stars caught in the branches. Stars caught in branches, Max repeated with good-natured exaggeration. Yes, Ma'am. And please stop calling me Ma'am. I'm not your great-aunt Edith. Max grinned. Yes, Ma. I mean, Charlie. She smiled despite herself. These kids reminded her why she loved this place. Their earnestness, their willingness to help, the way community service wasn't a chore but simply what you did. The sound of a truck engine drew her attention. Ethan's weathered blue pickup rolled to a stop, loaded with wooden arches for the lantern walk. He hopped out, his flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing tanned forearms dusted with sawdust. Morning, he called, nodding to Charlie. Morning, she replied too brightly. The arches look great. Thanks. He paused, surveying the setup. Did you change the layout? Charlie clutched her clipboard tighter. Just a little. I thought if we curved the path more naturally through those old oaks, it would create a more magical feeling. She saw his jaw tighten slightly. We always run the lantern walk straight through to the clearing. Everyone knows the route. It'll still reach the clearing, just with a more enchanted journey. Ethan's sigh was barely audible. The plans we agreed on had the arches spaced evenly along the traditional path. Plans can improve with new perspective. Charlie's voice remained light, professional, though her pulse quickened. The whole theme is fairy tales, Ethan. A little wonder and surprise fits perfectly. Folks come for tradition, Charlie, not surprise. Something in his tone, the subtle emphasis on tradition, sparked a flame in her chest. Let's discuss it in the supply tent, she suggested, gesturing away from the curious eyes of volunteers. Inside the canvas shelter, surrounded by boxes of decorations and tools, Charlie set her clipboard down with deliberate calm. What's really bothering you, Ethan? Because this isn't about a walking path. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it endearingly mussed. Nothing's bothering me. I just think changing things for the sake of change isn't always better. That's not what I'm doing. Her professional veneer began to crack. I'm trying to honor what makes this festival special while making it fresh and exciting. Drawing more visitors means more support for local businesses, including yours. We don't need to reinvent what works. Sometimes we do, the words burst forth with unexpected force. Sometimes things need to grow and change to survive. His eyes narrowed. Is that what this is about? You thinking Sweetbriar needs your big city expertise to survive? That's not fair. Isn't it? Ethan stepped closer, the scent of pine and sawdust filling her senses. You've got 1 foot out the door already, Charlie. I saw the suitcase. Heat rushed to her cheeks. I was organizing, not packing. But since you brought it up, yes, I got a job offer. One that would let me help communities like Sweetbriar while still using my skills. While still leaving. The accusation hung in the air between them. You think I'm just waiting to bolt again? Charlie's voice wavered slightly. After everything we've shared? I think history has a way of repeating itself. His voice was low, strained. You said yourself your Chicago life is waiting. You haven't once said you're staying here. Something inside Charlie snapped. Because you haven't asked me to. The admission rang through the tent, startling them both. Charlie's breath came quick and shallow as vulnerability crashed over her. That's not fair, Ethan said, echoing her earlier words. Isn't it? Now it was Charlie stepping closer, pulse racing. You talk about this town needing tradition, needing things to stay the same. But you're so busy clinging to the past, you can't see what's possible for the future. His expression hardened. Some of us don't have the luxury of chasing possibilities, Charlie. Some of us have responsibilities. That's not it. She shook her head, tears threatening. You never left this town. You never risked anything. I stayed because people needed me, he said, voice rising. Because Gracie needed stability after losing her parents. Because Dad needed help with the business. No, Charlie whispered, the truth crystallizing as she spoke it. You stayed because it was safe. The words hung between them. Too sharp, too raw. Ethan's face paled as if she'd struck him. From the tent entrance came a small, trembling voice. I don't want you to fight. They turned sharply. Gracie stood there, eyes wide behind her glasses, a sketchbook clutched against her chest like a shield. How long had she been there? How much had she heard? Sweetheart, Ethan said, stepping toward her, voice instantly gentle. We weren't fighting. We were just... Yes, you were. Her bottom lip quivered. You were yelling. About leaving and... Tears spilled down her freckled cheeks. Is Charlie going away? Charlie's heart shattered. Gracie, But the little girl turned and bolted, her sneakers kicking up dust as she fled. Gracie, Ethan called, rushing after her. Charlie followed, but Gracie had always been quick. By the time they reached the edge of the orchard, she had vanished. Charlie's legs trembled as she stood beside the last row of apple trees, breath shaking, heart roaring in her ears. She wanted to run and hated herself for even thinking it. Her fingers pressed against her lips to hold back a sob as the weight of what had just happened crashed over her. This is my fault, she finally managed, scanning the tree line. I shouldn't have pushed so hard. Ethan's face was grim. We'll split up. I'll take the west side of town, school, library, the park. You check the east, Missy's Cafe, the community centre. I'll call Mabel, Charlie nodded, already pulling out her phone. She'll rally the search party. Within an hour, half the town was looking for Gracie. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as neighbours called her name, checked garden sheds and tree houses, peered into the windows of empty buildings. Mayor Liz coordinated from the town hall, sending search teams to the edges of Sweetbriar. By dusk, worry had congealed into something thick and suffocating. Charlie's voice was hoarse from calling Gracie's name, her hands shaky as she helped Ruth check behind hay bales at the Thompson farm. She can't have gone far, Ruth reassured her, though her own face was pinched with concern. That child knows every inch of this town. She was upset, Charlie whispered, because of me. Because she heard us fighting. Ruth squeezed her arm. Children are resilient, dear, and that little girl adores you. The radio on Ruth's hip crackled. Still nothing at the creek, came Max's father's voice, moving to check the old mill. Darkness was falling when Charlie's phone rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen. Did you find her? She asked immediately. No. His voice was tight with worry. But Mabel thinks we should check the orchard again, specifically the old tree swing. I'll meet you there. Charlie was already running, heart pounding in her ears. The orchard was eerie in twilight, shadows stretching like fingers between the trees. Charlie followed the beam of her flashlight, calling Gracie's name. When she spotted Ethan's broad silhouette ahead, relief flooded her, not for herself, but because in that moment she knew they were in this together. Over here, he called softly, motioning with his flashlight. They found her curled beneath the ancient apple tree, her small body folded against its gnarled roots. Her sketchbook lay open beside her, pages fluttering in the evening breeze. In the flashlight's glow, Charlie could make out crayon drawings, 3 figures holding hands beneath an apple tree. A family. Gracie stirred at their approach, blinking owlishly behind smudged glasses. Gracie, Ethan breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. We've been so worried. I didn't want to hear you fighting anymore, she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. I came to the happy tree. Charlie knelt beside them, heart in her throat. We're so sorry, sweetie. We should never have made you feel scared or upset. Are you leaving? Gracie asked, her small voice piercing Charlie's heart. Like Mommy and Daddy did? Oh, honey. Charlie gathered the child into her arms, tears spilling freely now. Your mum and dad didn't want to leave you. They loved you more than anything. But you're leaving too. Gracie's voice was muffled against Charlie's shoulder. I heard you. Charlie met Ethan's eyes over Gracie's head, saw the raw pain there, the fear. In that moment, she knew what mattered most. I'm not leaving, she whispered, stroking Gracie's hair. I promise. The words fell like stones into still water, rippling outward with possibility. Ethan's radio crackled, and he quickly reported that Gracie was safe. Within minutes, the trees rustled with approaching footsteps as the search party converged on them. Relief washed over the gathering crowd. Mabel brought blankets. Missy appeared with thermoses of hot chocolate. The Johnsons offered their truck to drive Gracie home. As the impromptu celebration unfolded around them, Ethan caught Charlie's arm, drawing her slightly away from the group. Did you mean it? He asked, voice low. About not leaving? In the soft glow of flashlights and the distant sheen of stars, Charlie looked up at him. This man who had captured her heart twice in one lifetime. I never stopped loving this town, she confessed, heart thundering. Or you. The words hung between them, fragile as frost. Charlie held her breath, watching emotions flicker across Ethan's face, surprise, tenderness, and then something harder to name. Then why do you keep leaving it? He asked softly. His eyes searched hers for something. Reassurance, truth, maybe even a reason to stay, then shuttered as he stepped back, shoulders squared against whatever truth she might offer. We should get Gracie home, he said, turning away. She's had a long day. Charlie stood rooted to the spot, watching as he walked toward the waiting crowd, the space between them stretching wider with each step. Just before he reached the others, he glanced back once, a flicker of longing in his eyes that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. By morning, the story of Gracie's adventure had spread through town. Children whispered about her bravery in school. Older folks nodded knowingly about the healing powers of the old orchard. Festival preparations resumed with renewed vigor, as if the community had drawn closer through shared concern. Charlie threw herself into the work, heart aching each time Ethan politely declined her help or redirected her questions to someone else. They circled each other like wary dancers, never quite connecting. The festival was only days away now. Lanterns hung like captured fireflies throughout the orchard. The dance platform gleamed with fresh varnish. Booths lined the entrance, ready for vendors and games. Standing alone in the quiet morning light, Charlie traced her fingers over the wooden arch that would welcome visitors. Ethan had carved delicate vines and fairy tale symbols into its surface. A glass slipper, a rose, an apple. Beauty made permanent through his hands. She looked at the carved arch, fairy tales and hand-hewn hope, and then, at the phone in her pocket, its screen still dark, still waiting. The Heritage Revitalization email hadn't been answered. A life that could bridge her worlds, bringing renewal to small towns while using her professional skills. Not running away, but not standing still either. As the sun rose higher, painting the festival grounds in golden light, Charlie felt her heart torn between what she'd found and what she feared to lose, between the safety of leaving and the risk of truly coming home. The festival would begin tomorrow, and Charlie's heart had never felt more divided. Chapter 11. Lights, Love, and Letting Go. The week before the festival, Charlie barely slept. She bounced between the orchard grounds, the community centre, and the school gymnasium like a sparkler burning at both ends. Schedules, sound checks, backup booths, volunteer lists. It all lived in her clipboard, colour-coded and neatly annotated in her precise handwriting. Each morning began before dawn, her silhouette a lone figure moving through mist-covered grounds. Each evening ended with her collapsing into Mabel's guest bed, shoes still on, hair smelling of wood smoke and apple cider. She checked and double-checked the lantern delivery. She redrew the booth map 3 times. She met with vendors, wrangled stubborn farmers about parking arrangements, and personally hauled crates of string lights across uneven grass in borrowed work boots that rubbed blisters on her heels. And Ethan wasn't there. Oh, he was around. She saw him in flashes, measuring boards for the performance stage, speaking with Mayor Liz about the welcome ceremony, tightening bolts on the new benches circling the dance platform. But he didn't meet her eyes, didn't linger, didn't talk unless absolutely necessary. His absence, though partial, felt more complete than Marcus's ever had. It gnawed at her, a constant ache beneath her breastbone. Like hunger, but worse. The cornstalk archway needs to be wider, she told Max and his friends on Wednesday afternoon. Let's add another 2 feet on each side. We just finished it, Max groaned, but good-naturedly. Trust me, Charlie said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The hayride wagon needs clearance, and we don't want Farmer Thompson's tractor taking out our decorations on the first run. She worked alongside them, ignoring the ache in her shoulders, the burn in her palms. Physical pain was easier to manage than the hollow feeling that expanded each time Ethan turned away. She kept moving. Until one afternoon, Mabel stopped her in the kitchen, blocking the cabinet with a jar of peach preserves and a look that said enough. You've been out since 5 this morning, Mabel said, pushing a steaming mug of tea across the counter. The festival will survive if you take 15 minutes to breathe. Charlie reluctantly accepted the mug. There's still so much to do. The sound system isn't cooperating, and the pumpkin carving station... You're trying to fix everything, Mabel interrupted gently, except what really matters. Charlie stared into her tea, not responding. Mabel leaned against the sink, autumn sunlight illuminating the silver in her hair. You want to know why Ethan's scared? Charlie's head lifted, something hopeful and terrified flickering in her eyes. His ex ran out when Gracie was 2, Mabel said quietly. Couldn't handle the grief after Sarah and Robert died. Didn't want to be a mother to someone else's child. Packed a bag one night and never looked back. Charlie's lips parted. He never told me. He doesn't talk about it, not even to me. Mabel's voice softened. But you're not her, and he knows that. That's what scares him most. Charlie sat down hard on the kitchen stool, her heart turning over. The gaps in their conversations, the distance, the hesitation. It all made sense now. His fierce protectiveness of Gracie, his reluctance to believe anyone would choose to stay. Thank you, she whispered. That night, unable to sleep, Charlie walked the perimeter of the orchard, checking the fairy light installation one more time. The path took her past the old tool shed behind the main barn. Light glowed faintly through the cracks in the weathered wood. Inside, Ethan sat alone, sanding a carved wooden sign. "Welcome to the Enchanted Orchard," it read in flowing script. His hands moved with muscle memory, but his expression was distant, far away. Charlie didn't speak, just watched him through the window, the golden sawdust catching in the light like falling stars. He looked older in that moment, tired, lonely. His shoulders slightly curved inward as if bearing an invisible weight. She could have knocked, could have opened the door and begged him to see her. But not tonight. Tonight, she let the silence speak and let it whisper that she wasn't going anywhere. Sometimes waiting was its own kind of courage, so she wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself and continued her walk, letting the cool night air dry the tears on her cheeks. 2 days later, Charlie found Gracie perched on the porch swing at Ethan's house, pencil tucked behind one ear, sketchbook balanced on her knees. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she worked on what appeared to be a map of the festival grounds. "Hey, Peanut." Gracie looked up, glasses sliding down her nose. "I'm planning my festival route," she announced, "so I don't miss anything important." Charlie smiled, settling beside her on the swing. "Very strategic." "I want to see everything," Gracie said seriously. "The storyteller, and the pumpkin contest, and the fairy garden, and the dancing." "You've been practicing your dance moves?" Gracie nodded enthusiastically. "Uncle E has been helping me. He said I have better rhythm than him." Charlie laughed softly. He might be right about that. They swung gently for a moment, the creaking of the chains a comfortable soundtrack to their silence. "You think the festival will be perfect?" Gracie asked suddenly. "I think it'll be magical," Charlie answered honestly. "Not perfect. Magical things rarely are, but wonderful just the same." Gracie nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. Then she hesitated, fidgeting with the corner of her sketchbook. "Will you stay after it's over?" The question, so innocent and direct, caught Charlie off guard. Her throat tightened. "You want me to?" Gracie picked at a fray in her sleeve. "I want Uncle E to smile in the mornings again, like he does when you're here." Charlie blinked away tears. "That's a very good reason." "And I like when you help with my art projects," Gracie added matter-of-factly. "You know about colours and stuff." Charlie's heart squeezed. She wrapped an arm around Gracie's narrow shoulders. "I like helping with your art projects too." That evening, Charlie returned with a surprise tucked in a paper bag. She found Gracie feeding the ducks by the small pond near the orchard's edge. "Close your eyes," she told the little girl as they stood beneath the oak tree, dappled sunlight playing across the grass. Gracie obeyed, practically vibrating with excitement. Charlie carefully removed her creation from the bag and placed it gently on Gracie's head. "Okay, open." Gracie gasped, hands flying up to touch the delicate crown now perched atop her curls. Made of twisted grapevine, wildflowers, ribbon, and tiny battery-operated fairy lights that twinkled like captured stars. It transformed the little girl into something magical. "You made me a queen," she breathed, eyes wide with wonder. "Only for the best artist in Sweetbriar Ridge," Charlie replied softly. "Every enchanted festival needs royalty." Gracie giggled and twirled, the tiny lights catching in her glasses as she spun. "Wait till Uncle E sees." Ethan stood in the shadow of the path, the bag of duck feed limp in his hand. He hadn't seen Gracie laugh like that, full-bellied, spinning, radiant, since before the court hearings. And Charlie? She didn't just fit here, she belonged. The way she looked at Gracie wasn't the way someone looked at an obligation or a responsibility. It was how you looked at someone who had claimed a piece of your heart. The tightness in his chest loosened, just a fraction. Gracie spotted him and ran over, careful not to dislodge her crown. "Look what Charlie made me. I'm going to wear it for the whole festival." "It's beautiful, kiddo," he said, his voice warm as he knelt to her level. "You look like you stepped right out of a fairy tale." His gaze lifted to Charlie again, a silent thank you passing between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, the first real connection they'd shared in days. That night, the lantern rehearsal transformed the orchard. Volunteers gathered as dusk fell, ready to test the lighting before the festival opening. Charlie stood at the entrance arch, a bundle of string lights in her arms, directing placement with gentle authority. "The paper lanterns need to be staggered," she called, "so they create a path of light rather than a straight line. Think constellations, not streetlights." Townsfolk moved among the trees, hanging delicate paper lanterns from branches, stringing lights along pathways, placing luminaries at the edges of booths. Slowly, the orchard metamorphosed from a familiar place into something otherworldly. Charlie worked methodically, weaving lights along the welcome arch with careful precision. She stood back, studying the effect critically. "Beautiful," she murmured to herself, satisfaction warming her chest. Behind her, footsteps approached, and she knew without turning who it was. Ethan stopped beside her, wordlessly taking in her handiwork. After a moment, he reached for the remaining string of lights at her feet. Without speaking, he began threading them through the upper branches of the arch, his height allowing him to reach places she couldn't. They worked in silence, side by side, their movements falling into natural rhythm. She handed him bulbs. He secured them. She untangled cords. He wove them into the wooden framework. They moved around each other like dancers who knew the steps by heart. The fairy lights cast a gentle glow across his face, softening the lines of worry that had taken up residence there. She found herself stealing glances, memorizing the concentrated furrow of his brow, the firm set of his jaw, the way his hands, strong and capable, handled delicate things with surprising gentleness. They didn't speak until the arch was nearly finished, a glowing portal inviting visitors into enchantment. She reached up to adjust a stray bulb, stretching on tiptoes. He leaned in behind her, his chest almost touching her back, and without thinking, gently brushed a curl from her cheek. His breath was warm on her neck. Her fingers itched to reach for him, but she waited. 1 heartbeat, 2. The moment suspended between them, fragile as spun sugar. His fingers lingered for the briefest moment, barely a whisper against her skin. Charlie turned to face him, heart thundering against her ribs. The lights around them flickered like fireflies, casting them in silver and gold. In that moment, they could have been the only 2 people in Sweetbriar Ridge, in the world. Ethan's voice was quiet, almost broken. "I'm scared to lose you again." The admission hung between them, fragile and honest. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. "I'm scared too." His eyes searched hers, unguarded for the first time in days. "But it doesn't mean we should hide." Their gazes locked, a conversation without words passing between them, acknowledgement of pain, of fear, of possibilities. "I'm still here," she whispered, the words both a statement and a promise. "And I'm not running anymore." And for the first time in days, he smiled, tentative but real, like sunrise breaking through clouds. Around them, the orchard glowed with hundreds of twinkling lights, each one a small hope in the gathering darkness. Chapter 12. A Kiss Beneath Lanterns. Sweetbriar Ridge shimmered like something out of a storybook. It was the night before the Apple Blossom Festival, and the orchard glowed with soft light, paper lanterns dancing gently from every branch. The townsfolk meandered through the paths with steaming cups of cider in hand, laughter echoing through the trees, their faces lit not just by the strings of fairy lights, but by something older and deeper. Pride, love, anticipation. Charlie stood near the edge of the lantern path, clipboard finally abandoned, hands clasped behind her back, quietly watching her work come alive. The evening carried the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke, mingling with the sweet perfume of apple blossoms that dotted the trees like confetti waiting to fall. Mabel's pie booth had been draped in twinkling garlands. The cider tent was decorated with hand-painted signs from the 3rd grade class. Even the welcome arch stood proudly at the entrance, its beams etched with tiny hearts and initials, most of them carved years ago, when other young couples found magic in these same trees. Ruth from the real estate office walked past with her grandchildren, stopping to squeeze Charlie's arm. "You've brought something back to this place, dear. Something we didn't know was missing." Charlie smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt truly useful. Not just productive or successful. Useful. Like her presence mattered in a way that couldn't be measured in promotions or client acquisitions. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Ethan's voice came from beside her, low and warm. Charlie turned to him. In the lantern light, his eyes seemed deeper, his shoulders more relaxed than she'd seen in weeks. "It really is." They walked slowly beneath the hanging lights, past the music stage where tomorrow's performers would play, past the painted mural Gracie had made with her classmates, now proudly mounted at the orchard's center. Ethan's hand brushed hers once, then again, and this time, he held on. His palm was warm against hers, calloused from years of woodworking, steady in a way that made her heart flutter. Their fingers interlaced as if they'd never forgotten how to fit together. The noise faded as they wandered into the deeper part of the orchard, away from the crowd. Lanterns still swayed here, casting a golden haze between the trees. The grass beneath their feet was cool, the air sweet with apple blossoms. "I forgot how magical this place could feel," Charlie murmured, gazing up at the branches silhouetted against the indigo sky. "I never did," Ethan said, his voice quiet but certain. They reached the swing, its ropes gently creaking in the night breeze. Charlie laughed softly, memories washing over her. "I dared you to jump from this with no hands." "You dared me to do everything," Ethan chuckled. "I was lucky to make it to 18 with all my bones intact." "You broke your wrist jumping off the Johnson's barn roof." "Because you bet me I wouldn't." "I didn't think you'd actually do it," Charlie protested, but her laughter betrayed her. "You were always trying to impress me." "Did it work?" His voice had dropped lower, tinged with something more than nostalgia. She looked up at him, heart skipping. "Every time." Charlie stepped toward the trunk, brushing her fingers along the rough bark. "You remember this?" she asked, pointing to the old carving half-covered by moss and years of growth, E+C, surrounded by a wonky heart. "I never could draw a proper heart," Ethan said, moving to stand behind her. "But I meant it." Charlie turned, her chest aching with something soft and fierce. The years between them seemed to fold and compress, bringing them back to who they'd been and forward to who they might become. He stepped closer until she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of cedar and something uniquely Ethan. "This whole festival, all of it. You made it better," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't do it alone. But it only worked because of you." His eyes searched hers. "You see possibility everywhere you look." The silence between them grew deeper, filled with unspoken words and second chances. Then he bent his head and kissed her. Not rushed, not hesitant. A long, slow kiss beneath the lanterns and the stars, the apple blossoms falling gently around them like snow. A kiss that tasted of years lost and finally found, of coming home and setting out on adventure all at once. Her hands moved to his shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath cotton and flannel. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as if afraid she might slip away again. When they pulled apart, breathless and flushed, a small clap broke the quiet. They turned to see Gracie standing a few feet away, crown of fairy lights tilted rakishly on her head, beaming with unrestrained delight. "Finally," she declared, hands on her hips. "I thought you'd never figure it out." They laughed, startled and joyful, hands still joined. "How long have you been standing there, Peanut?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Long enough," Gracie said sagely. "Mabel owes me $1. She said it would take until tomorrow." Charlie's laughter bubbled up, bright and clear in the night air. "You've been betting on us." "The whole town has," Gracie confirmed, skipping forward to take both their hands. "Can we have hot chocolate now? Missy made the special kind with extra marshmallows." Together they walked back toward the festival grounds, Gracie swinging between them, chattering about which festival activities she planned to visit first. Later, when most of the town had gone home and the lanterns flickered low, Charlie and Ethan lay side by side on a picnic blanket in the orchard. Gracie had fallen asleep beside them earlier, now curled up in Mabel's lap beneath a colourful quilt a few yards away. Above them, stars pricked the velvet sky, clearer and more numerous than Charlie had seen in years. No city glow to dim them, no skyscrapers to block their light. She stared up at the sky, counting stars, wishing life had room for both dream and grounding. For New York and Sweetbriar. For ambition and home. The thought had been circling her mind for days now, the possibility that perhaps her life didn't need to be divided into neat, either-or categories. "Do you remember that shooting star we saw junior year?" Charlie asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "Down by Willow Creek?" "Of course." Ethan's fingers traced patterns on her palm. "You wished to leave Sweetbriar. I wished you'd stay." She looked over, surprised. "You never told me that." "You were already packing. Already had your college acceptance letters lined up on your desk. Your eyes were set on horizons I couldn't even imagine." There was no bitterness in his voice now, just a quiet acknowledgement of what had been. Charlie grew quiet, contemplating the path that had led her away and back again. "I never really felt like I belonged in the city, not fully. I had friends, a nice apartment, success on paper. But something was always missing." She turned to face him. "I thought I had to go find something out there, but maybe what I needed was right here all along." Ethan turned to face her, his expression open, vulnerable. "I've been fixing up a house." She blinked. "What house?" "The old Whitman place, up on Rose Hill." Charlie sat up slightly, surprised. The Whitman house had been vacant for years. A beautiful Victorian with a wraparound porch and gingerbread trim, sitting on 3 acres overlooking the valley. "It was falling apart," Ethan said, sitting up beside her. "I wanted Gracie to have something stable. A home that's ours, not just hand-me-downs. I've been working on it slowly, planning for someday." "Is that where you've been disappearing to, all those evenings?" Charlie asked, pieces falling into place. He nodded. "The kitchen's done, Gracie's room too. Master bedroom still needs work and the porch railings need replacing, but—" He trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. She reached for his hand again, squeezing it gently. "I'd love to see it." He hesitated, a flash of vulnerability crossing his face. "Maybe," he said, voice careful, measured. "It's a house for 3. His gaze dropped momentarily, then lifted to meet hers again. "I don't know how to ask for that without sounding selfish. But I think it's what Gracie wants. And I know it's what I want." Charlie's heart swelled, a flood of warmth spreading through her chest. She opened her mouth to respond. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated, then pulled it out, the screen illuminating her face in the darkness. Her stomach dropped. "Claire, Chicago office." The text read, "Need you to pitch Monday, 10 a.m. Major client. Think New York expansion. Your designs impressed everyone. Career-making opportunity. Let me know if you can zoom in." Ethan noticed her expression. "Everything okay?" Charlie looked at the orchard, at the lanterns still glowing above them, at the man beside her who had just invited her into his future, at the sleeping child wrapped in quilts who had claimed a piece of her heart. And the weight of choice returned, heavier than before. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, just Monday." "Work?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "They want me to pitch a major client from here, on Zoom." She lowered the phone, torn between pride at being needed and frustration at the timing. "It could mean a New York expansion for the firm." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "That sounds important." "It would have been everything I wanted 3 months ago," Charlie admitted, letting the truth of it settle between them. "And now?" His question hung in the air, laden with unspoken hope and fear. Charlie looked up at the stars, then back at Ethan. "Now I'm not sure what I want anymore." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. No, that's not true. I know exactly what I want. I'm just not sure how to have both. Ethan's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch achingly gentle. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. I know. She turned her face to kiss his palm. Tonight is just for this. For us. She didn't know what decision she'd make come Monday, but she knew who she'd be thinking of when she walked into that Zoom call, whose faces would flash before her as she spoke of design concepts and expansion plans. Above them, the lanterns swayed in the gentle breeze, casting their warm glow over two people finding their way back to each other, one careful step at a time.